I didn't forget. Money changes everything, folks. Just remember that. This is the Grassy Knoll, April 4th, 2007. We have with us today the brothers Collins, Philip, and Paul, and we're going to talk about the second part of a two-part article they've written entitled The Deep Politics of God, the CNP, Dominionism, and the Ted Haggard Scandal. If you want to check out the work, please go to conspiracyarchive.com, hit the button on the left for commentary, you'll find them. Guys, thanks for coming back. Good to hear from you again.
Hey, thanks for having us back, Viz.
All right. Listen, do me a favor, just at the outset here. Will you do a thumbnail on the CNP, just on what it states it's supposed to be?
Oh, sure. Well, the CNP, according to, Mark Bender? Yeah, Mark Ambender of ABC News, it's supposed to be like a conservative version of the Council on Foreign Relations. So it's supposed to be like their own counterpart to the establishment's policy, foreign policy cartel, just one of the greatest elitist conduits here in the United States. And it has, within its ranks, members of the CFR, it has a lot of contragators involved, a lot of contragators, as a matter of fact.
Mm-hmm.
Ollie North. Ollie North, Edwin Meese, John Singlob, and it has a lot of neoconservatives within its midst. And what it basically is doing is it's drawing Christians through its dominionist ideologies that gets bounced around by members like Marvin Lasky and D. James Kennedy and other guys thrown in there, Monson Jr., Howard Monson Jr.'s and big dominionists. Through that dominionist ideology, it's drawing Christians into the practice of what Professor Peter Dale Scott called deep politics. And deep politics is simply the criminal activity that makes up the everyday business of the power elite and the deep political system. The deep political system simply is those parts of the political system in this country and in other countries that have prostituted themselves out to the power elite. We know that deep political practices go on today and that they've gone on going back hundreds of years, but that they go on in the modern day because of Bill Moyers during the 1980 broadcast of Bill Moyers' Journal, where he was going into David Rockefeller. He stated that what critics of David Rockefeller see as a conspiracy, David Rockefeller considers to be just business as usual in a circumstance of life and all. And that's basically, he confirmed with that statement that deep politics, deep political practices do in fact go on to this very day, and all, because that's what deep politics is it's activity that you and I would consider morally objectionable, in that you and I would be we'd be outraged. But if we were engaged in this, we would be prosecuted to the fullest measure of the law. And theft, graft, blackmail, assassination, that sort of thing, and all. But for them, it's business, and it's like on the Godfather when Marlon Brando says, somebody says the word corruption, he's like, this word corruption, I don't like this. This is not corruption, this is business.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're dealing with here. It's an organization meant to draw Christians into deep political practice.
And it's also a hotbed of neo-Gnosticism.
Well,
basically, these individuals, in fact, every individual that's committed to the realization of a one-world socialist totalitarian government, all the factions of the power elite really constitute neo-Gnostics. And what neo-Gnostics are, they're the new strain of Gnosticism. The new strain of Gnosticism seeks to basically take the end of days, that which is known as the eschaton, and they transform that object of faith into an object of emanate experience. They basically reconceptualize it as an object of emanate experience and transplant it here within the physical cosmos. And so they view the eschaton.
There's that word.
Yeah. By the way, Dwight, that's for you, along with the manatized ontology and eschaton. Just in case Dave Emery's listening.
Yeah, but you got to keep Dwight the Bright happy and also use the word and show it.
A little bit tangential, but you can tell Dwight that he was right on the money when he named the Yankee and Cowboy Wars book. That's a very important book to understand. These guys are basically represent kind of like the cowboys. These guys are the hot to trot, just full out jihadists. There's some old Rockefeller internationalists and old establishment guys within their midst that kind of draw them back into line, so to speak. But there's a lot. I mean, you're talking about a lot of those hawkish kind of cowboys being involved. But
let me ask you about this though. As far as the CMP and the problem I got, you guys said that maybe some of them don't know what's going on, and of course that very could well be. I kind of think they can't be that dumb. If we know, they got to know. But besides that, here's the problem I've got. When you go to try to find out information about them, you find out that they're secret and they don't want to tell. And I'm saying to myself, how can a Christian be involved in a secret situation?
Absolutely. Well, what was it that Jesus said? Jesus said, when he was brought before the Pharisees, he said, I've spoken out in open, in secret I've said nothing. And these guys should start to recognize that the fact that there's a culture of obscurantism that is being promoted within the ranks of this organization, that should tell them that there's something going on here that is not quite right. The fact that there is something secret means that there is something to hide. Here's a possibility for you with some of the more innocent members of the CMP. Okay, if you look at Christians that join a Freemasonic lodge, they have no idea what they're getting into at first, and then they'll go through the whole ceremony of Hiram Abiff and that whole counterfeit born-again experience. And they'll say, well, that was weird, and then they'll just go home and they'll sit there with their wife, and their the wife will ask, well, what did you do at the lodge tonight? Well, it was weird. I went through this whole thing, and they raised me up from the ground, and the whole jazz and everything. And he's like, I don't know what that was. And his wife will say, well, I know exactly what that was. You were just born again. And all of a sudden they come to the horrible realization of what they just went through. But what's the problem? Is that when they were raised up, who are they facing? They're facing their grandfather, their uncle, their best friend down the street. They're facing the pastor of their church, and so they realize that what they went through was something bad, but they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to cause waves. So what they do is they just quietly disappear. They stop showing up to meetings and just send in their dues once in a while. There's no complete breaking of the ties, and so these guys will get involved in the CMP, and they'll see these members there, these criminals, and what they'll do is, instead of just totally breaking the ties and beginning to expose them, they will just quietly start to distance themselves from the CMP. But by then, it's probably too late, because a lot of damage has been done to their thinking, because the ideas that have basically been spread into their thinking by the CMP. The example I gave last time, Donald McAvaney. Donald McAvaney likes to make it sound like the Christic Institute's investigation into the Iran-Contra affair was nothing more than imagination run amok, and that the Iran-Contra scandal was a fiction, and that it was merely being used to purge the National Security Council of its conservative elements. Well, there's a half truth in that. I believe myself that the Iran-Contra scandal was used because liberals have an agenda too, and ought to basically get rid of conservative elements within the National Security Council. That being said, however, the Iran-Contra scandal was by no means a fiction whatsoever. If it wasn't, we wouldn't have had Ollie North shredding untold numbers of documents involved in the whole Contra war.
Let me ask you something. You said something. Would you repeat what you said about the Christic teachings?
The Christic Institute?
Yeah.
The Christic Institute was basically doing an investigation into Iran-Contra. They were basically doing an investigation, and it's a more left-leaning. It was a more left-leaning group, but the truth is that they did hit on some elements of the truth concerning Iran-Contra.
Well, how about this? Let me ask you. This is the same one. I'm assuming that it is. I got a book here, a couple of pages from a book called The Christic Teachings for Man's Guidance in the Church of the New Order of the Ages for both his temporal and eternal welfare, issued by the Church of Illumination. And for those who've heard other shows, guess where they're at? Quakertown, Pennsylvania. Are these the same characters?
I don't think so. I'm not too sure.
Okay.
I'm not too sure. I know the Christic Institute through their investigation of the Iran-Contra scandal and the stuff that they brought out, because it was when the Christic Institute began to file suit in court that the whole Iran-Contra scandal began to basically get blown open and everything. But my point was that basically, where did Donald McIlvaney get this idea that Iran-Contra was a fiction and everything? Well, if you go to the CMP, you find John Singlob, you find Edwin Meese, you find Ollie North and everything. So you have these guys there basically having some kind of impression upon the man's overall thinking, and another example would be Stanley Monteith. Stanley Monteith has done some good work. However, on his show on numerous occasions now, he has had Glenn Spencer on. Glenn Spencer is basically, his whole anti-immigration outfit has been funded by John Tanton. John Tanton, his whole network of anti-immigration groups is in turn funded by Richard Millen Scaife, who's been involved with the CMP. So, I mean, is he having these guys on because of connections that he has in the CMP, basically having an influence on the man's thinking?
Basically, also with the CMP, what you'll find is kind of a recycling of the same organizational model with, say, the old Bavarian Illuminati, in that Adam Weishaupt managed to recruit several Christians to the Illuminist cause because they managed to provide enough Christian window dressing for what was really an occult ideology. And in the case of the CMP, you have the Christian window dressing there in the form of Dominionism, because Dominionists talk a lot about God, they talk a lot about Jesus, they talk a great deal about all these biblical concepts, but these biblical concepts have a neo-Gnostic spin to them. For instance, they totally invert, I believe it's Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, which deals with how we're not supposed to wrestle with flesh and blood, but we wrestle against the spiritual host of wickedness in heavenly places. Well, Ted Haggard, who was a CMP member and has fallen into disrepute because of the sex scandal, Ted Haggard has completely and totally reconceptualized the spiritual warfare that the Christian is supposed to engage in, and reconceptualized it as preemptive warfare. Well, this is just vintage neo-Gnosticism, because what he has basically done is he's eviscerated Christianity of any spiritual elements and completely relocated spiritual warfare here to this plane of existence, the physical plane of existence,
and transformed it into preemptive warfare, which of course suits the needs and desires of the neoconservatives who are closely aligned with CMP members and closely aligned with Dominionists. And preemptive warfare, by the way, and also Ted Haggard is a proponent of globalism. Preemptive warfare and globalism qualify, in the words of the now deceased Malachi Martin, as socio-political Darwinism. Globalization and globalism are basically a socio-political Darwinian view that holds that the interdependence of nations, economic, political interdependence, social interdependence, the emergence of a one-world socialist totalitarian government is the unavoidable corollary of man's purported evolution, political evolution. And so what you have Christians who ostensibly reject Darwinian biology. They don't believe that man came from an ape or from some common ancestor, but they embrace Darwinism in principle. And this is extremely paradoxical because Ted Haggard has been on numerous occasions criticized by a neo-Darwinian named Richard Dawkins. But really the men have more in common in principle than they really believe, because what Haggard and what several CMP members are embracing is socio-political Darwinism. Preemptive warfare rose to prominence, came into vogue during the age of social Darwinism and eugenics, and all that globalization is socio-political Darwinism, the belief that man is evolving towards a common world interdependence, a one-world socialist totalitarian state. And that's really paradoxical given that they call themselves Christians. But again, Adam Weishaupt managed to do the same thing. He managed to recruit several Christians to the Illuminist cause just by using, some common Christian terminology. He spoke of Christ and everything, but when he spoke of Jesus, he was not speaking of the same Jesus that many Christians thought he was speaking of. He was speaking of Jesus as, in his own words, quote unquote, the asserter of the empire of reason. And that's a lot different from Christ as we know him. Jesus is not some asserter of rational thought and the primacy of the human mind, of human reason. But that was what he saw Jesus Christ as an avatar, as a new age avatar, somebody who had come along to help speed along man's progress towards becoming his own Messiah through the powers of his own cognitive abilities. And that's basically what Adam Weishaupt did, was he reconceptualized Jesus along these Gnostic lines. And that's what the Dominionists do. They reconceptualize Jesus along more Jacobin contours. Jesus becomes more of a political revolutionary. He's not willing to come back unless they stage a political coup.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, doesn't it ever... See, I can't believe that this notion hasn't dawned on any of these individuals that are in there, and especially the principals, mainly because, you understand it isn't for we, the brethren, to take matters in our own hands. They've got to know that, so the only conclusion I come to is they deliberately and willfully blow through the stop sign.
Well, I would agree with that, except that we have examples of, in the past, Christians being basically hoodwinked like this and all, because they keep just enough Christian terminology and enough ideas and concepts that people are familiar with there to basically fool a person into believing that it is Christianity. Yeah. Like Phil was saying, the Illuminist, who is basically the group, in our opinion, that systematized the means and methods that make up deep politics and all. They fooled tons of Christians. Like at one point in his writings, Weishaupt bragged about how he had basically won a major Protestant preacher over to his cause and went, "Oh man, how is there anything you cannot be convinced of?" But also something to take into consideration here is that perhaps some of these people rationalize it they might rationalize their involvement with dubious beliefs and people who believe dubious things,
but
because they get so frustrated. The fact is that the political system, as we know it, is not favorable to the Christian worldview, and it's not favorable to Christians. And so they figure, well, these people, no matter how dubious their belief systems, these people can provide me with the social and political capital that I'll need to help push Jesus' agenda across.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Exactly. That they kind of rationalize it along those same lines, and that's the problem with politics. People get in, well-meaning idealists, and they think, well, you know what? If I have to deal with this individual, no matter how dubious they are, this person is going to help me do something good, and it never ever works that way.
The human creature is complex in that we seldom come across somebody that is pure evil or somebody that is pure good. We run a spectrum.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of like the movie King of New York City with Christopher Walken. At one point, Christopher Walken plays this just horrible mobbed up guy who's doing all sorts of terrible things. And throughout the course of the film, does terrible things, kills people, just steals and loots and all sorts of terrible stuff. And at one point he says, though, to a close confidant and friend of his, he says, I don't have much time left here. I don't have too much time left on Earth. But before it's all over, I'll do something good. And the whole idea is yeah, I have had to kill, I've had to steal, but something good will come out of it. And it's just reiterating Weishaupt's own mantra that the ends justifies the means.
Okay.
People will rationalize.
But all right, let me throw you at what I believe. First of all, these people are supposed to have the Holy Spirit.
Right.
Okay, that rings bells automatically. My feeling is you got to want to believe the lie. You got to want to be deceived. And like the song says, excuse me for my backstreet bromides, it's like you knew damn well I was a snake when you took me in. And that's what I see with these cats. They know it. They heard the sirens. They heard the whistles. And no matter what their good intentions are, they are putting themselves in front of what the Lord's will is. I just can't see that they didn't shut down, the bells and throw the Holy Spirit in the freezer until later.
Well, though, I mean, it's kind of like I forget who it was that said this, but in hell, conscience will be the loudest thing that anybody in hell will hear. And it's like here in the here and now, right in this existence, we can really shut down conscience. We can deaden ourselves to it. And the Holy Spirit, can speak to one's conscience and speak to one's conscience in that still quiet voice and everything. But the problem is are people willing to listen? Are people willing to shut up and are they going to listen to the voice of the one to whom they gave their lives, their hearts and souls? Or are they just going to grieve the Spirit?
Or did they ever give themselves over? Are they Hebrew Sixers, or they've been fakers all along?
Yeah, well, we can sit here and debate it back and forth, but when it comes to that kind of question, that's something that we'll never know.
We'll never know. We don't know what happened in that person's heart and in that person's spirit. So either way, I think we're all in agreement something's terribly wrong with them spiritually, and they've been spiritually and mentally, morally compromised.
I don't know if this is the time to do it. I'm going to pose the question. If you want to shelve it for later, that is completely okay, because I don't want to step on where you're going. Mm-hmm. But as I wrote to you in an email, here's what I'm wondering also. And again, defer it if you wish, because I will bring it back up later. I won't forget. I'm starting to think, I don't even couch it in anything but explicit language, that amongst the Muslims, that amongst the Christians, and amongst the Jews are raised up a group of rogues, fakers, whatever, who are becoming the poster boys, which is eliciting the hatred of people toward Islam, toward Christianity, toward Judaism. Do you want to go there, or do you want to deflect that?
I think that you're correct, and that actually that kind of brings us into what I kind of wanted to go into.
All right, great.
One, actually, this week. Malachi Martin spoke about what he called the super force. And the super force simply was basically churchmen that had rank and power, and that for him was within the Vatican. For you and I, it would be within the Protestant Church, because I believe there's a super force within the Protestant world as well. And they basically occupy key points of the hierarchic structure, and they control the organs that are the most vital of the church. And he also described the super force as basically a ecclesiastical version of a hostile corporate takeover team. We have the same going on within the Protestant ranks, and I'll just add that for me the super force that Malachi Martin described sounds a lot like a spiritual and ecclesiastical version of L. Fletcher Prouty's secret team. The secret team was basically people within government and outside of government that held top security clearance and were privy to intelligence reports from CIA, NSA, other members of other groups within the intelligence community. That's what we got here. We got people within the church and outside of the church that basically have access to the highest levels of the churches and are privy to the knowledge that is bounced around within them, and are in key positions of influence to make things happen. And that's what I see. We see the CMP as kind of being is kind of a super force for not only the Protestants, but I think also that there's a sizable Catholic contingent within the CMP ranks, which means that some of them are involved within the super force that Malachi Martin spoke of being involved in the Catholic Church. And for the Muslim world, I believe it's the Muslim Brotherhood, and all. But there seems to be within each one of the Abrahamic faiths, and with the Jewish religion, I believe that it's the remnants of the Sabbateans and the followers of Jacob Frank, the Frankist, and on just going to have to defer to Barry Hamish if you want to learn more about that and everything. But there seems to be these rogue elements within each one of the Abrahamic faiths that are basically using the faiths, and they don't want to outright destroy them, like the Carbonary back in the day. The Carbonary did not want to destroy the Catholic Church so much as just get in there and
infiltrate,
co-opt it. Yeah, get rid of its substance and then use it as the institution to bring about what they wanted to bring about.
Yeah, but basically what these little contingents of rogue elements within each Abrahamic faith they are, and I know I keep hitting on this, I probably sound like a broken record, but they are really neo-Gnostics, because what they will do is they will take the theology of those respective faiths, and they will completely and totally reconceptualize all the spiritual concepts of those faiths and completely transplant them here within the ontological plane of the physical universe.
But let me ask you this though: would you say it's true? Give me your impression on this. That really, when it all comes down to occultism or apostate practices, that usually, Pike said, you'll find the Kabbalah there always.
Yeah.
Not only do I believe that's true, but isn't Gnosticism actually the great lie from the serpent?
Yes, it is. Gnosticism, to give you an idea of what Gnosticism is really promoting, I got into it with somebody a little while back over this. Gnosticism is actually promoting Luciferianism. It is a form of camouflaged Luciferianism, and here is why. An old Egyptian text, an old Egyptian Gnostic text called the Hypostasis of the Archons. In that text,
Jehovah, Yahweh, Elohim, God, our God, the God of Abraham, Isaac. The Christian God is caricatured as an evil oppressor, which they call the archon of arrogance, and he kept man fettered with an arrogance in the Garden of Eden. Now, according to this text, a liberator came along, and that liberator, surprise, surprise, turns out being the serpent. And the serpent acts as kind of like the facilitator for man's the journey along to gnosis. And of course, the serpent's efforts are thwarted, and man remains fettered in ignorance. And according to the text, man would later have his progressive development towards gnosis facilitated by Jesus, who the Gnostics depict just as, not as Savior, not as Messiah, but as just an avatar, just as Adam Weishaupt depicted him, just as a teacher who facilitates man's gradual journey towards employing his own cognitive powers as the source of his salvation. That's the core of Gnostic doctrine, is self-salvation. They don't believe in salvation from a transcendent God. They believe salvation comes from within. Salvation comes through gnosis. Salvation comes through the cognitive powers of man. And this is what Adam Weishaupt taught when he called Jesus the asserter of the empire of reason. Reason with a capital R, because reason, human reason, has been apotheosized, has become God, and is our supposed facilitative element that helps us, facilitates our journey along to becoming God.
But isn't it interesting, too? You can see this in Rockefeller Center, which I think is an interesting place for obvious reasons.
Yes.
Yeah, and what does it say? Wisdom and knowledge. Wisdom and knowledge. That's all you ever hear from the other groups. Again, wisdom and knowledge, and that's exactly what caused the fall in the garden.
Absolutely, and this occult belief system was codified as revolutionary doctrine with the Enlightenment. Now,
right.
This is the interesting part. This might go a long way around the barn to get back to your original point, but the Enlightenment was was a backlash against the religious community after the 30-year war, because people were so horrified by the religious fanaticism and the bloodshed that came out of that. The Enlightenment came along and presented itself as the secular alternative, but the Enlightenment's Bible was Diderot's encyclopedia, and encyclopedia was adorned with the symbols of occult Freemasonry, but more importantly, it had an illustration. The first edition had an illustration of Lucifer on it. And Lucifer, they looked to Lucifer as a symbol of man's own ability to achieve apotheosis through his own cognitive powers. Lucifer symbolizes reason apotheosized. Now today, and this is taking it back to your original point, today, thanks to the Dominionist and the other neo-Gnostic elements that have co-opted traditional Christianity, you hear secular progressives like Michelle Goldberg and Chris Hedges talking about the war against the Enlightenment, and this is why the Dominionists and the Christian, these what they call Christian imperialists, must be stopped. They do correctly identify the enemies with the Dominionists and the neoconservatives. They do correctly identify them as the enemy, but why do these secular progressives believe they must be stopped? Because they are waging, quote-unquote, a war against the Enlightenment. Well, see, all you have here is a Hegelian dialectic, and what is happening is Christianity is being propped up as the scapegoat for all the woes of humanity right now, because thanks to a so-called Christian president, we're over in Afghanistan, in Iraq, we might be going into Iran anytime, and so basically we have the repeat, the recycling of the 30-year war, which, was viewed as purely acts of religious fanaticism, and now they are presenting their Enlightenment alternative. The Enlightenment is resurfacing, and there could be a backlash against Christians and the other Abrahamic faiths as a result of this fifth column that has overtaken the ranks of all the traditional adherents of the Abrahamic faiths.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, well,
taking it back to what you were saying, yeah.
Hold on a second. Let's just do this because I haven't done it at all. This is a good time, obviously, to take up such. Folks, you're listening to the Collins brothers, Paul and Philip. You can read their writings on conspiracyarchive.com. Under commentary, click it, and you'll find everything there. Also, folks, anything new? We've not spoken about your book. How can people get it? It's now an ebook, too, I believe. So please speak to that at this time.
Okay, the new edition of The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship, it was published through Book Surge in 2006. You don't want the 2003 edition. You want the 2006 Book Surge edition. It's available in print through Amazon.com, and it's also available in electronic format as an ebook, a PDF, through www.4acloserlook.com, and that's the official website of the nationally syndicated radio talk show, A Closer Look. If you right now, if you go and you get it as an ebook through A Closer Look, you can also get, along with it as a package deal for free, David Guyette's Masters of Persuasion, which acts as an excellent companion to our research. But yeah, you can get it through as an ebook through A Closer Look, or a print copy through Amazon.com.
I'm going to throw something out to you, and again, I don't know how this fits in the whole scheme of things, but it's something that's come back to me that I wanted to talk to you about the first time, and again, I don't know if it's appropriate. But we had on a brother from Toronto by the name of Robert Burke, and he came on to talk about his travels in China and in Europe across a month. And one of the things he stated, and the reason I think about this is that when you guys bring up Grover Norquist, he always reminds me of, like, he's all things to all people. And even like with Bush and all these characters and Norquist, they court Arab Americans in the United States. But in the meantime, there's this whole demonization taking place. So what Robert was saying, he didn't say that about, Grover Norquist, I did. But what seems to be happening in this perfect, Orwellian doublespeak is that, well, what he said was, when he came back, we will fight those who we do business with and do business with those who we have fought. And what I'm saying is, I'm looking at this contradiction almost everywhere. You know what I mean? It's like when I look around at kids being forced in public schools to, recite some planks of the Quran or, wear burqas or whatever. On the other hand, but everybody's working up this hatred toward him. So I'm saying, how can we be doing all these same things? In the meantime, Bush wants to go after the evil empire, and Norquist is there trying to get money out of Arab Americans.
Well, this has happened before, though.
Okay.
Go back to World War II and shortly thereafter,
right,
and everything. The war drums were already beating against the Soviet Union, and we were gearing up for the Cold War while they were still our allies against Hitler and everything. You take the revelations of Vasily Mitrikhin, I'm sure you're familiar with him. He was a high-level defect from Russia, and he basically has shown where he's dead now. I believe he died a few years back at 81 from pneumonia, I believe it was. He basically shown how Harry Hopkins was making sure that the Soviet Union was receiving all that it would need for the construction of a nuclear bomb, basically vindicating everything that Major George Racy Jordan wrote in his diaries that were published. George Racy Jordan was in charge of seeing the Lend-Lease, I think it was Lend-Lease, basically the transfer of technologies and equipment to the Soviet Union at Great Falls base. He came across several different packages with terms written on them that, like heavy water and the uranium and plutonium and all of this stuff and basically plans for the construction of a nuclear bomb. So we saw, and this was all going on at a time when the Soviet Union was still our allies, and then right afterwards,
the war is barely over, and they start, beating the war drums and saying that the Soviet Union is our enemy, and having prepared, that. So we had two different messages going out. We at the same time we had Uncle Joe Stalin, and then we had Stalin the dictator going out to the people at the same time. So I mean, like it's been done before, and it's just it'd probably be done several times again in the future, where you basically are promoting them and then decrying them at the same time.
It really, what American businessmen did, financiers and industrialists, is they made sure also, of course, and I had that article on my website, and the only reason I bring that up is that in 1976, somebody came out and said, check out what GM and DuPont, and I believe Ford also, did with the Germans prior to World War II. I mean, it was out there, but people like myself at 25...
And then you got on the other side, you got CMP member Frank Gaffney saying, "Shame on you, Grover Norquist," and we got to fight these radical Muslims. And then even the more uppity Dominionists saying, "Well, we got to go over there and put in with military force."
Yeah. Well, you got people who are closely aligned with the Dominionists and the CMP, like Ann Coulter, going on talk shows and say we basically got to go over there, kill them, kill their leaders, chop their leaders' heads off, I believe was what she said. She actually promoted decapitating them or something, and convert them to Christianity. Like a conversion experience in Christianity is something that can take place through coercion. But this is...
Yeah, but here's what, I sit here and I watch this slut. All right, let's call her what she is.
No, she is.
She's a slut, and she comes on and says stuff like that, and you also left out the nastiest thing that she apparently said. And I'm saying to myself, I look at this thing who apparently never got her birthday dress ever dirty.
Yeah.
And I'm like, do you understand violence? Did you ever get a punch in the nose, understand what it feels like to be on the receiving end of pain?
Exactly.
And then you go on TV and you start running your mouth about doing this to other people.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
It would be one thing if it was Richard Marcinko who had been there and done that, to go on and start saying, like stuff about killing people and everything. But I mean, she gets up there, she talks, and after she's done, you feel like you've been fondled by a feminist bodybuilder, and it's like, but then you look at her background and you know that she's had no experiential knowledge when it comes to things such as war and everything. And it's really easy for her to say stuff like that when somebody else has to go and fight the fight. But we have this with the CMP. We have certain ones of them going out and trumping up a lot of support for radical Muslim groups, and then on the other side, we have guys going out and saying we have to go and we have to fight the Muslims. So you got them radicalizing on one side, and then
vilifying on the other.
And then vilifying on the
Hegelian activism at its best.
And it gets the conflict, the Hegelian activism that they want going, and what it also does is it also causes a sizable portion of the population to go into paralysis because it's cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
And the cognitive dissonance, basically, when the person is receiving two conflicting messages, they'll basically go into catatonia, and you don't have to worry about them. They'll stay out of your way while you do what you want. They're frozen because it's just too much. Two different messages. You don't know what to believe, so you just bail out of the process entirely.
Yeah, by the way, 9 out of 10 biologists still can't figure out if Ann Coulter's a woman, so that pretty much gives you some idea where she comes from.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've got a question for you, or a statement, and a little crack from the wise guy up in Utica. He loves you guys.
Oh.
He says, my wife and I were thinking about the new Mitsubishi Eschaton, but we decided on the Acura facade. All right, we got a straight one here for you. I guess this is a confirmation or a topic for discussion. And there is a quote here. I guess it's a little too long, but something I guess Robertson said maybe on the 700 Club.
Robertson?
Yeah. Anyway, here's the statement. Is it correct to say this is a way to get the agenda done for the government using, quote, God, and fooling people into believing that the more evangelists that are voted into government, everything will be okay because they see it as God and think it's the real God, but it ain't.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way of putting it. I mean, these people, what you have is you have, people are starting to... It's one part conspiracy, which is shame on them, and then one part just cultural indolence and laziness, which is shame on us. Because these people, a lot of Christians who seldom ever crack their Bible, maybe show up to church on Sundays, go to the bake sales and the picnics and what have you, they're counting on their pastors to tell them the truth. And, I mean, I hate to say this, but, I actually have relatives who are caught up in this trap. They went and they voted in George W. because their pastor told them to. Well, he's a good Christian man. Look, we saw him on the front cover of, was it Newsweek?
Oh, yeah.
Praying.
Newsweek.
So he is going to give the Christians the social and political capital they need to turn America's direction around, to turn it around and lead us away from immorality. And so as a result, we wind up getting these characters into office that are not devoted to Christian principles, but are completely devoted to elite initiative.
And it's because we relied on the different pastors and ministers that got their degrees at seminaries, to basically be our compass, when the truth is that it was our own personal responsibility to read the book for ourselves, to ask the Spirit for discernment ourselves, and we didn't do that. And the rank and file did not do that.
Yeah, and Pat Robertson, by the way, Pat Robertson has supported several members of the CFR. He's supported several members of the establishment and everything. His book, The New World Order, it had a few gems of wisdom in it, but for the most part, it didn't reveal very much about the establishment. And there's even some who assert that it was ghost-written, and it was just written out of financial expediency, because it got its organization to 700 Club plenty of donations.
Yeah, lots of donors. And he's been with the CMP, another individual of great importance to his life. J. Peter Grace was a member of the CMP, and J. Peter Grace baptized his children. J. Peter Grace was involved in the creation of AmeriCares. Pat Robertson's CMB Christian Broadcasting, or CBN rather, CBN Christian Broadcasting Network, has been a major contributor to AmeriCares, and AmeriCares was basically used for different intelligence operations in Latin America, down in the South. And J. Peter Grace also was the man that was responsible for Otto Ambrose, who was connected with I.G. Farben coming to the United States. Otto Ambrose was a Nazi, and so I mean, this is a guy that people are listening to for their and using as their compass and their guide to wade through the murky waters of the political system and make the right decision and everything.
I want to, if you heard the sound of a drawer being opened over here, I pulled out that Newsweek issue. Let's see, March 10th, 2003. And I have to laugh because it is such a stage photo. He's sitting there wincing, folding his hand, and it looks like he's squeezing out a turd, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And then how faith changed his life and shapes his presidency, why his God talk worries friends and foes. Now, I sent you that excerpt from Good Morning America.
You sure did.
Now, when he was allowed to talk on his feet, I mean, nothing says universal God in Christ like that did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was a great deal, I noticed there was a great deal of ambiguity regarding the person of God. Because, I mean, really, God, the word God is so nebulous.
Exactly.
It can mean anything. Anything could be anybody's God. I mean, I've heard a lot of people, would say,
Nature's
God. You know, I mean, it's really that nebulous.
It can be assigned to anything or anyone.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't really speak a whole lot about Jesus.
He didn't narrow the definition for himself, and that was probably a political expediency on his part, and it was, because that way God-believing people everywhere could vote for him.
Well, and, when people are avoiding the use of Lord. I mean, that to me is a very small point, but when people just keep talking about God, 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 then I start getting into the head of like, okay, you have no idea what's going on, you just want to sound like you do.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it gives them enough spirituality to feel like they're,
right.
Like they have something more. But it also is very non-committal. You don't have to commit to a God. You have to commit to a Lord. If the Lord is the Lord, then the Lord is the one who's steering the ship and everything. But if it's God, he might, be easily reducible to a cosmic vending machine that I put so much cash into and get whatever I want out of it.
For us, it's quite simple. In the Gospels, Jesus says, "Go and baptize in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost." And then in the book of book of Acts, they go and they baptize in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. So when you refer to God, you have to use that name. You have to use the name the Lord Jesus Christ with us to be, or you could for us to know what God you're talking about. Otherwise, if you just use the term God, you could mean just a plethora of other things.
But that's what it's meant to be. It's meant to represent the what would you call it, the Parthenon of all the available little g gods out there. It's deliberate. There's one thing I want to throw out to you. I'm going to give it back to you for last comments, and then we got to scoot till next time we meet again. One of the things I was thinking about when we were talking about the industrialists and financiers backing both sides, which they always do, and that's why you said it always works, it always will work. It's a great formula. Why screw with it? But you know what I was thinking is that IG Farben and how nefarious it was, and how it was broken down, disassembled, around the Nuremberg trials, and then it went over here. And every time I look at Bayer, BASF, or Aventis, I'm looking at IG Farben. And then what strikes me so interestingly, and maybe it's a coincidence, and maybe I'm delirious, as some would say, idiots, and that is, when I look at the Bayer aspirin or the Bayer logo, there's a reason why it's configured like it is. You catch my drift?
There's some, I guess you could say there's some iconic continuity there.
Are we thinking maybe of the Iron Cross? You never thought about that, did you?
It is a recurring motif.
And
you find those motifs all the time.
Yeah.
It's like I don't want to get too tangential, but our newest article, our newest article, which is available at Conspiracy Archive, deals with the now defunct TIA, or the Total Information Awareness program.
If they're really defunct.
Yeah, if it's really defunct. A lot of the initiatives carried on under different programs. But you look at that, you have the all-seeing eye crowning the truncated pyramid. Well, this is a recurring motif.
Sure.
Throughout occultism, it was invoked, of course, by Adam Weishaupt's Illuminati. It was invoked by Jeremy Bentham, who, of course, developed the Panopticon and everything. And oddly enough, you have, with the TIA, you had the application of a panoptic model to society. It was a surveillance system, just like the Panopticon.
Sure.
And everything. And it goes on and on. Nancy Pelosi's invocation of the term New Order of the Ages and what have you. These people really don't have much in the way of originality and everything, but the iconic and indexical, symbolic continuity of the signs that they invoke does seem to semiotically gesticulate to some recurring themes amongst these people.
It's time for me to monetize my Ishkatan and get my ontological butt out of here. One other thing, too, folks, would you take aspirin from somebody who also is a pesticide maker? I mean, I wouldn't stick anything Bayer makes in my mouth. I wouldn't even put it on the insects. So anyway, we've been talking with Philip and Paul Collins. We'll pick this up later on, maybe this month or next month. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
All right, listen, I appreciate you coming on. Good discussion. And for everybody up north, I'm just going to play a little song for your April spring weather.